Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the next lesson of the Nostr Developer course. Today, I'm going to teach you guys how to build Reddit, a Reddit clone on Nostr. So, you guys ready to get started? I think we should. So, how we're going to do this? I'm going to the reason I'm doing this is because I want to show you guys how I personally work, and I know that I'm not the best developer, and I don't actually recommend that you do exactly what I'm doing throughout this lesson. But I want you to kind of see how a Nostr developer approaches these issues, and then you can customize what you see me doing and make it your own. Okay? So if I was going to create a Nostr client that looks like Reddit, this is what I would do. I would first of all open up Reddit. I'd be like, okay, here's Reddit. This shows, this shows what Reddit looks like, and this is kind of what I want to emulate. But this is a lot. Like, this is a whole lot of work, and a whole lot of what makes Reddit special, I think, is what it looks like, is the appearance of it. You know, you've got like cool sidebars and stuff over here, and then you've got all the graphical images and stuff. And I'm really not personally a graphic designer. I'm not a guy who wants to spend a lot of time doing front end work. So the way that I'm going to approach this is to try and steal. I'm just going to become a good old thief and steal somebody else's designs, and let someone who's an expert in design come up with this stuff for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to good old GitHub. I'm going to go to our good friend where we can steal other people's code with their permission, with their consent, and I'm going to search for Reddit clone. Okay. Now, so when I search for this, it's going to come up with a bunch of results. Like, a lot of people have created things that look like Reddit and uploaded them to GitHub. So just taking a look at the first one here, he gives us their pictures in here. Yeah, there are some pictures. So this is what his Reddit clone looks like, and that looks pretty good. I mean, I could see wanting to be on a page that looks like this. It's got the upvote, downvote buttons and the content. But one thing I need to make sure is that it's in a language I understand, right? So over here on the right, you can see the language. It's Java. And I don't know Java all that well, so I want to find a way to exclude results that are in languages I don't know. But over here, I can do that. I can just pick languages that I do know, like JavaScript. That's one I know. And so now I'm just seeing results that are in JavaScript. So this is an approach. What I'm doing here, I'm trying to find someone who's already done the work of creating something that looks like Reddit, so I don't have to do that. I just have to do the Nostr integration part. So I can look through a few of these, and let's see, does this one have something where I can view it? Yeah. So this is what his Reddit kind of looks like. Of course, he has no database on here, so there's no content to show. But this looks kind of interesting. I did this about like 6 weeks ago in preparation for this, and after a while of searching, I found a version of Reddit that I really liked that was last updated 6 years ago. And the reason I like that is because I like the way Reddit looked 6 years ago. I actually prefer old Reddit to new Reddit. So I found this guy after just searching through GitHub for a while, looking at various options. This is written in, if I look over here, it's written in JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. I know all of those, and it looks nice. So how did I find out it looks nice? Well, this one he has a page here where you're supposed to be able to view it, but it no longer works. So what I did to find out what it looks like is I downloaded it, which I will do for you here. Git clone this project. So the next thing we're going to do is I've cloned this project, and now I'm going to follow his instructions down here, which say to run npm install on it. Okay, so I'm running npm install, and npm, if you're not familiar with it, that's the Node package manager. It comes standard with any installation of Node.js, which is how you work with JavaScript on servers as well as on desktop machines. Any JavaScript developer, you're probably going to be familiar with installing Node and the Node package manager. But if you're not, you can search for that online. Just search how to install Node, how to install npm, so you can get up to speed with what I'm doing here. But now I have installed it. We've got his environment installed here, and I'm going to skip the development version and just run straight to his final build. Because I'm not doing exactly what he's doing here. I don't need to see how he developed this. So just going to run his build, and then if I go into his distribution folder, we see an index.html file, which is exactly the thing I want. So let me just pull this up, and let's take a look at it in our browser. Cool. So here is the Reddit he created, and this is what Reddit looked like 6 years ago. Was the last time this guy, you know, modified his GitHub. So yeah, this is what we're going to build. We're going to use his front end, the front end that this gentleman, Aaron Cow, created for us and licensed under the wonderful open source MIT license. We're going to use that so that we don't have to build a front end. We just have to hook this up to Nostr. So you might think that's the next step. You know, now that we've got something that looks like, Reddit, now we just need to integrate Nostr with it. But let's just take a look and see if that's the case. Because in fact, what we're going to learn here in a second is it's not. So this HTML file right here is the entire content of that of what he created for us. And if you notice, it's not very big. In fact, it's too small. Because, you know, where's the header? Where's the sidebar? Where's all this content coming from? None of that's in this little HTML file he created for us. And the answer is all of that's being pulled in by means of this JavaScript right here. This little JavaScript file's got all that stuff in it. And all he's doing is saying, take everything that's in this JavaScript file, execute it, and then that'll create our web page for us. Well, that's not what I want to do. A lot of JavaScript developers might like doing that. They might like to, you know, clone his project and then work with this source directory where he's got all this TypeScript stuff. But I'm not a TypeScript developer, so instead of doing that, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to right-click and inspect and go all the way up to the top HTML element over here. I'm going to click Edit that. And now, inside of this little text box over here is all of the content of this web page. The headers, the sidebars, and everything. I'm just going to go ahead and replace everything in his with that. So now we've got this big old honkin' file. This is more like what I like to work with. I'm going to save that. Also going to modify this doc type to be capitalized. Doc type HTML, and save and refresh. Okay, and we got the same thing. You know, this looks exactly like what his looked like. But now I can see stuff like I can see the sidebar over here and the header over here and identify where that comes in the code. You know, he's got a nav bar. That's where all that stuff at the top comes from. And, you know, all this is more familiar to me and more like something I'm familiar with working with. So you might be a different developer. You might like doing it with more like write it all in JavaScript and then compile it. I'm a guy who likes to work with stuff in HTML and write his own JavaScript. A couple other changes I want to make here. He has got all the way at the bottom, he's got two JavaScript files. One called underscore, which is an old library for interacting with jQuery, and one called bundle.random numbers and letters minified JavaScript. And I'm just going to remove those because I'm not going to use his JavaScript. I'm going to write my own for this. So I don't need those. And if I refresh, everything should still be the same. Yeah, okay. Then we don't need, since I'm not using this JavaScript file, we can eliminate that. And this CSS map is something that TypeScript uses to identify where the parts of your CSS you're creating in the JavaScript file should map onto their equivalent positions in the HTML. But we're not using TypeScript anymore, so I can delete that. And all we're left with is an index.html file, a CSS file, and two little images in here. Let's look at a couple of those images real quick. This is an old school way of developing. He puts all of his images, except for the logo, in this one little sprite file right here. And then he's like mapping little parts of this image onto the various things in his web page. It's really cool. I think that's an awesome way to do this stuff. It's not really used that much anymore from what I can tell. And then he's got the logo. That's the only other image file in here. So we've made this project a lot simpler now. And we've only got four files left: index.html, CSS, two images. So I don't need the rest of the stuff that's in this Reddit clone. I can just pop all that stuff out here, replace the similarly named files, and now I can delete that stuff and that stuff. I am going to keep the license, that nice little MIT license, because it actually says you have to. If you read the MIT license, you can do anything you want with it as long as you include, you know, this license. You have to include the license. So I'll do that. And now, if I just go back to my URL and remove the dist part, we've still got the same thing. So we've got a lot less stuff to work with now, and we've still got something that looks like Reddit. We can add our own JavaScript to it and make it work on Nostr instead. So that's what we're going to do. The next step in the procedure here, let me take a look at my notes. The next step in our procedure is to turn stuff into JSON. So all of the content here is hard coded into this HTML file as raw HTML elements. And I'll just show you one example down here. So he's got all of these things called entries that are all under this div, this division of the web page called entries. And each one, like we can see, this one's got a vote count. This entry has a vote count of 75. It's got a thumbnail that's of a link kind. It's got a title of Richard and his crew attempted to invent the ex-wife sandwich. All of that corresponds to the first element right here. It's an entry under an entries div with vote count 75, a thumbnail that looks like a link, and this title right there. So we need to take all of this stuff and actually populate it dynamically rather than having it hard coded in. So I'm going to do that by copying all of this first entry from there to there. I'm going to go down to the bottom of our document, and I'm going to create a script tag right here, right above the end of the document. Script tag created. And let's create a function called createEntry. Var createEntry equals. Okay, and we're just going to return the text of that entry that he already created for us. Tab it over, and we will save this inside as this index.html file right there. Okay, cool. So now I've got a createEntry function that will return this entry, the copy of the first one from the top, and I can use that as a template to create a JSON that we can pull in, so that we can pull in content from Nostr, fill out this template, and populate this list of entries with stuff from Nostr instead of taking it from, just what's hard coded here. But let's see if it works. I'm going to tell it to call createEntry, so we get all that text, and I'm going to dump it into the entries div, and we'll just append it right there. Now, if I save and run this, I don't think it's going to work. In fact, it did not work. You can see down here at the bottom, what we should see is a 21st element that looks identical to the first one, Richard and his crew, but we don't see that. So I can check my console to see if there's an error, and indeed there is. I have used a variable called the $, right here, which is undefined. So why did I use a $? Well, I like to use something called query selectors, which was invented by a group called the jQuery team when they invented something called jQuery a long time ago. And basically it allows you, well, I've gone over this in the Nostr, or in the pleb dev course. If you took that course, you'd know about this. The jQuery people use the $, which I'm just going to add to my document here, as a general variable that allows you to easily query for items in your HTML files, query for elements. So I like to use that syntax, and that's what we're going to do right here. I'm just going to define a variable that uses the jQuery style query selector so that we can use that syntax to grab the entries element and append our entry to it. So now if I refresh this and go down to the bottom, well, we've got something. We've got some text down here that it doesn't look like HTML, but what it does look like is I've managed to take some text that will eventually be populated from Nostr and append something to this entries array. But I don't want it to be text. I want it to be HTML. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this function so that, not modify that function, modify down here so that I will create a div. Var div equals document create element, div, and div.innerHTML is going to be equal to this create entry thing. Now, all of this text is going to go into a div, and I can use the first child of that div, which is going to be our entry, first child element, and pop that into our entries array, or in entries div. So when I refresh now, we see something undefined. Cool. So div.innerHTML equals this, and append it. Let's console log our div here. We do have a div that's got a whole lot of content in it, like what I want, and I should be able to just console log the first child element. Oh, it's first element child. That's what I did. First element child. Save, refresh, and now look at that. We have populated our list with an entry that is identical to the first one, and that's what I wanted. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to templatify this so that we can pull in stuff from Nostr instead, and just keep rolling with this. All right, so let's try that. How do we make a template? Well, I'm going to create some variables. For example, the variable number right here, and we're going to call that number 21. And then we'll replace this right there with string interpolation that says to pull in the word number, or pull in the value of the variable number created earlier. If I refresh now, this now says the 21st entry. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. We're going to templatefy this so that we can populate this in a dynamic way with content from Nostr. So let's just keep doing that. Another thing that we're going to need to do is the vote count. That's going to need to be templatefied. Our vote count equals 75 in this case. And then we need this one that says whether it is a link or or text. That one we're going to need to do. So it's going to be either link or text. Actually, let me show you what I mean by that. So there's a class down here for the thumbnail that specifies whether this should look like, you know, a link or look like a text box, and you modify it by just changing it from link to text. So if I save that and refresh, this one now looks like a text box instead of a link. So that's kind of cool. You can just change it back and forth like that. And this guy's awesome CSS skills make it so we don't have to do that in JavaScript. We can just rely on CSS to flip those back and forth for us, depending on which kind they are. So I'm going to templify that by saying it needs to be either a text or rather a link or text. And in this case, var link or text will be link. And we do the same thing for this one. This one also needs to be link or text, because that controls this little button over here, which for text looks like this play button, but for links it looks like that little play button, but for text it's supposed to look like another text box. So now if we refresh, this is telling it's a link, and if we just change that one little variable to text, check this out, it changes both of them just like that. Lovely. Okay, so there's a couple of things where it would be dangerous for us to use string interpolation to modify this stuff. And I learned this the hard way back when I was making Enigma, which is an early chat client for Nostr. And I used the method I'm using right here, where I just return some text and append and use the inner HTML function, which I'm using right here, to control what you're seeing. Well, if you do that, you're injecting HTML onto your web page, and HTML includes JavaScript, which is code. So it's sometimes safe to do that if you, as the developer, are in control of the HTML that you're injecting. But on Nostr, we're pulling in data from the internet. Like, we're pulling in stuff from Nostr. Anyone can upload random stuff on there. So if you just take stuff from Nostr and blindly inject it into your web page, you can give your users viruses, because somebody might upload like I don't know, malicious malware JavaScript as the title of their post or as the content of their post. And if you just inject that straight into your HTML, you're going to have a bad time. Your user's going to not like what happened. So we're not going to do that. I've learned my lesson from Enigma, and we're not going to use string interpolation to just pull in the content of this thing. Instead, what we're going to do for the title, as well as for the username and the subreddit, we're going to use something called inner text instead. And let me show you how that works. So I'm going to grab my div here, div.inner div.getElements by class name, and I'm going to get the class of the title, which is right here, title, and I'm going to get the first child of that, which is this a tag right here, first element child, and I'm going to set its inner text to equal this stuff right here. So now, if I remove it from up here and save this, I should get the same thing down here. I did not. I got an error. And I know why I got an error. Because I forgot that when you get an element by its class name, it gives you back an array. See the little S here? Get elements by class name? Means there could be more than one. In our case, there's only one element by that with the class of title. So we can just get the first one. But we need to add this little brackets here with the 0 to say only get the first one. And now if I refresh, I don't get an error, and I do get the same thing I had before, which is what I want. But now we can not worry about people injecting malicious JavaScript into our web page, because the inner text function, unlike the inner HTML function, sanitizes user input. And it'll make it so that any JavaScript that a user might try to inject onto our web page doesn't actually harm anything. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is delete that console log, because I don't need a little log of everything I've entered in here in my console. And I'm going to make it so that this returns create entry, and this will return the first child element. Then I'm going to move all of this stuff up into this function. So here we go. The function will create a div. Inside of that div, it will return this text. So var template equals all of that. So then I need this to return the template. That will need to go under the div. And once I've done that, I'm in a much better position, because I'll be returning the first element child of that and then appending it onto there. Other thing I need to do is make this a variable. So this will be title, and var title is going to be that stuff. Save, refresh, no errors. So we are still pulling everything in the way we want, but we're getting more and more of this stuff to be variables, which is great. So let's keep going with that. The next thing we need is the username. So instead of using that username, we're going to say var username equals this. And just like we did with the title, we're going to get we're going to find the class of user and take its first, the first one of that class, which is this guy. And we don't, in this case, need to take the first child element, because there is no child element of this class. So we will just change its inner text to username. Save and refresh. Good, that's still working. And the last one I want to do right now is the subreddit. So we'll do the same thing, but for the subreddit, which is going to be this. var subreddit equals that. And instead of interpolating it using string interpolation, we're going to find the element, which is subreddit link, get its inner text and change it to subreddit. Save, refresh. Very good. Oh, no, not quite, because I forgot to put in the r/. It's going to be r/ plus the subreddit. Refresh. There we go. Okay, so now we have a function that can take variable items and insert them into our entries list, which is exactly what we want. I'm going to now make it so that we pass these parameters into this function instead of hard coding them into it, so that they're even more variable. So we need the number, we need the vote count, we need whether it's a link or a text, we need the title, we need a username, we need a subreddit, and that's it for now. Let's then copy this stuff, move it down to here, and we will create an entries object or array, and inside of that entries object we will create inside of that entries array we will create an object which has all of this stuff. The number is going to be 21, the vote count is going to be 75, linker text will be the string text, the title will be Richard and his crew in this case, the username of the user who posted this will be there, and the subreddit is going to be that one. Okay, all of these need to be changed to commas because that's how objects work in JavaScript. And that should work. No, that won't work because I have to tell my code to append the contents of this in. So I will do that by saying I will do entries dot for each one. Take every item inside of this entries object. There's only one item, which is this object. And for each one of one, I want to run this function with each of these keys and get its input and insert its value in the corresponding position. So item vote count, item link or text, item title, item username, and item subreddit. Save, refresh, and we did get an error. Vote count was not defined. So we've got vote count right there. And at the top of this thing, that's why. Typo. Good. So we are making this more and more variable so we can pull in stuff from Nostr and just populate this whole list dynamically from Nostr instead of making this all hard-coded. Cool. So now that we've got this, if I make a copy of this thing, and maybe I'm going to change just one thing. I'm going to change this from being text to being a link. If I do that, you see now it's getting copied dynamically. It's taking content from this entries array and populating our Reddit client with whatever we put in this array. Which means if we want to make this work with content from Nostr, all we've got to do next is populate this array using Nostr, and our little program here will automatically put everything in, and it'll be awesome. One thing I want to do at this stage is eliminate all of the hard-coded entries that are in our entries div, and we don't need them anymore because now we're able to populate this list dynamically. And so I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff, which will make our code a lot smaller, which I like. You know, it's nice to have much smaller code. So come all the way down to here. We no longer need any of that stuff. We just have an empty entries array, and it's going to get populated based on those two things only. So now both of them have an item count, item number of 21. So that's not good. We want them to have that based on how many things are in the array. So let's just change. Let's add index to here so we can count which item we're on, and then the item number will be index plus 1 because this index starts from 0. We want to add 1 to that so that this one will be 1 and this one will be number 2. Then we actually don't need this line anymore. Don't need to hard code in the number. So refresh, and now we have just 2 elements on here, both of which currently have the same vote count. Both of them have the same comments, but we're making progress here. Another thing I want to do, well, let's actually start pulling in content from Nostr now. Now that we've got this entries array that we're able to dynamically populate our Nostr client with events from, let's go get a bunch of events from Nostr, and we'll use those to populate this field. Okay, so that's our next step, and let's do that. I'm going to find an existing Nostr client that looks like Reddit, and I'm going to try to be compatible with it. So Satellite Earth is a Nostr client that came out recently that is also trying to emulate Reddit. So you can see how they have, you know, n/ tags for their communities, n/anti-work, n/bitmeet, all that stuff. They're trying to emulate Reddit already, and I would like to be compatible with whatever standard they are using to pull in events. So what standard are they using? Well, how I found this, I happened to find this page pretty early when they're young, and there's actually a community on here called the NIP 172 development community that I suspected when I saw that. I was like, I'll bet that's created by the maker of Satellite Earth, that community, and NIP 72 is probably the Nostr standard that he's using to create this Nostr or this Reddit-like client. So that's how I found that. And if you were making a Reddit client in the future, you might have to do that. You might have to go and find something that is similar to what you're currently trying to do, and look for a NIP. You know, the Nostr improvement proposals specify how we make Nostr clients interoperable with one another. So find the NIPs. Find the NIP for your type of client, and that'll help you a lot. So let's do that. Let's go to GitHub, find the Nostr protocol, find the NIPs, and let's look for, what number was it? 172. Let's scroll down the list. Uh-oh, they only go up to 98. They don't have 172 in here. Okay, well that means it's very young protocol because it's not even officially accepted into the standard NIPs yet. But most of the ones that aren't accepted yet are in the pull requests. So we can go into pull requests and see if we can find 172 in here. Indeed, there it is, moderated communities. So let's click that and see how we're going to get these events to populate. The goal of this NIP is to create moderator-approved public communities around a topic and provide a simple solution to Reddit clients that might want to come into Nostr. Great, that's exactly what we're doing. Read the spec here. Reddit-style moderated communities. So this is kind of interesting. A few weeks ago, I went through and, well, not even a few weeks ago, like days ago, I went through and read this specification so I could figure out how we could integrate it into our little Reddit client here. And it's really interesting. I encourage you to read through the full thing so that you can learn, if you're going to make a Reddit client, how to make it compatible with existing ones. But the main thing we're going to use here is this post approval. Every time someone wants to post to one of these communities is created, like, you know, the Estonia community or the memes community or whatever, anytime someone wants to make a post in there, it has to be approved by the moderators of that community. That's what sets Reddit apart from other forums, is that anyone can create a community where they're the moderator. So trying to emulate that on Nostr, he decided to have the moderators approve posts in their communities. And that's what we want. In order to populate our list of events, we want the events that have been approved by moderators. So those use this kind 4550 tag. And what do they do with it? Well, they include the content of the post they're approving, and some information about it, such as which subreddit or which community it's going to go into. So that's what we're going to look for. We're going to pull in kind 4550 events. And let me look at my notes, because I remember when I did this that simply filtering for those was not enough. I also wanted to modify my filter. Indeed, I limited it. I told it to only give me the first 40 events. So let me go back to my code, and I'll show you now how to start pulling stuff in from Nostr. To do that, I'm not going to use Nostr tools. So in previous lessons of this course, you might have learned about Nostr tools, which is an excellent library for doing things like connecting to relays, requesting messages, sending messages. And if you're the kind of developer who likes to use well-designed, standardized libraries, I definitely encourage you to do that. But me, I'm super Testnet, and I don't do that. So instead, I'm going to go back to the code that I wrote for my first lesson of this course, the Nostr workshop, super testnet Nostr workshop, and I'm going to use code from there to connect to a relay and request events from it. This is the code right here. So I'm going to copy all of this good stuff, 105 lines of JavaScript. Pop it into my document. I'm going to do this one near the top. So let's put it in somewhere in the head. There's the head. There's some metadata in the head. Might as well sort all of this stuff out while we're at it, so it looks a little cleaner. And I'm going to stick my information... yeah, right before the end of the head. Click enter. So there it is. That's where I'm going to stick my scripts. And if I refresh, I will see an error. Yup, because I didn't define the libraries that I used. So I'll also grab these 3 libraries that I use for interacting with Nostr. Save and refresh. And great, now we have a Nostr public key right there. And just like in my old workshop, we are getting some signed events and some messages that we've created and sent off as test messages. So we've connected to Nostr, we've got a pub key, and we've got some signed events and the ability to communicate with Nostr relays. Now let's modify the requests that we're making to these relays so that instead of requesting events by us, we'll be requesting kind 4550 events that are Reddit approved, or that are approved Reddit style posts. Great. So we'll go down here and let's see. We've got a subscription ID and a filter right there. I'm going to take those and move them into the event listener open function because I like them being in here where they're not global variables but rather local variables to inside of this function. I'm going to change from searching for a particular author to a particular kind, 4550, and I'm going to add a limiter of 40 because I don't need every Nostr event that's ever been posted. Actually, I don't even need 40. I think I only need 20 because on this page, I'm only going to go and show the first 20 of these events. Okay, cool. So let's get 20 kind 4550 approved Nostr events, and down here where this thing fires off some test messages, I don't need to do those. I only need to send my subscription And I don't even need a log at the signed event because I'm not creating signed events yet. I'm not sending any messages yet. I'm just getting them. So what I'll do then is I will log my request, and when I receive an event, it's going to log the event and log its content. Well, I don't need to log the event right now. I'm just going to log the content. Let's see what we get back. Refresh. And indeed, look at all this stuff. We've got a whole bunch of events that came in. A Hello World event, which is kind 1. Okay, we don't want kind 1. We wanted kind 4,550. So why is our filter not giving us the right messages? Socket send, the subscription. Maybe these are the right kinds. Okay, gotcha. Because what we're seeing here is not, we are seeing a kind 4,550 event, but we're only logging the content of that event, which is the approval of the post. And the post is not a kind 4550 event. The post is a kind 1 event that got approved in a kind 4,550 event. So these are the things you kind of have to be aware of. We requested 4,550 events, and we did get them, but wrapped inside them, according to the specification right here, is the post that they're approving. And that post is a kind 1 event, which is why we're seeing those right here. So that's good. We are seeing posts for subreddits, and they tell us some good information about them. Right here, they tell us the subject. So we can use that to populate this line. That's really cool. They tell us the subreddit that it's being posted into. Right here, in this case, it's being posted in the NIP172 development community. Or we could look at one of the ones down here. This one is posted into the gaming subreddit. So cool, we can use that to populate, this line right there. Let's get to it. Let's actually use this content. All right. So I will now change this line. Instead of just logging this information, what I'm going to do is I'm going to parse that JSON, because I know that all Nostr events are JSON and these are Nostr events, so I can parse them as JSON. So the event is going to equal json.parse content. And I don't need to log it for now, but what I do need to do is if event.kind, if the kind is equal to 4550, then I want to parse its content, and let's create that JSON structure that we have down here. So I will copy one of these objects, put it in here, var object equals this thing, indent it properly, and we want to populate this information based on the contents we get from our Nostr event. Well, we don't know the vote count yet, so for that, I'm just going to say they all have 0 votes for now until we know what their vote count really is. Whether it's a link or a text, well, for now, I'm just going to say they're all text, and pretty soon I will show you how we can detect if they're a link or not. We need their title. Their title I can get from their subject. So for that, I have a note on how to do that. I can get their subject using a function I wrote called extract subject from event. So this is one of the things I had to write. A lot of what I've been doing here has not been writing code, but rather interacting with the code that Aaron Cow wrote and just kind of moving stuff around in it. But when I got to this part where I need to get the subject of a post, I actually had to write something. So, like, for example, this one. This post right here has a subject of 21 Polska with Nostr. So I need to extract that somehow, and I wrote a little function that does that for me. So I'm going to stick that function right here at the bottom of my head tag. And this function is called extract subject from event. It takes an event as input and creates a null subject object, goes through every tag in an item, and finds the one that's called subject. And then once it has it, it removes any line breaks from it and returns just returns the first 100 characters so that they don't make like really long subjects that make the page look weird. So that's what it does. And also, if the event doesn't have a subject, which I found some of them don't have subjects, it'll use the first 100 characters of the post itself as the subject. So that's what that one does. And let's just see how it works. I will refresh the page and run this extract subject from event. Yeah, I still need to console log those so I have something to pass into it. Console log them, refresh. All right, so there's one. I'm going to extract the subject from one of the ones that does have, from this one. Let's see how this works. There we go. The subject, as you can see right here, was the word test. And so the result we got was, the word test. That's the subject. So I can use that. Oh, and let's do one that doesn't have a subject. So this one right here doesn't have a subject. So what it should do for us is pull out the first 100 characters of the message itself, which is really looking forward to this game called Resistor. So if I run this function with this as input, what we should get out is really looking forward to this game called Resistor. Awesome. We can get a subject and populate it based on that. So we will just do extract subject from event and pass in our event right there. Save that. Then we need to extract the username. So the username in our case is just going to be the event pub key. Later we will go through and find out what the users we'll get the user's metadata and then from Nostr, and then pull out their display name from there and use that instead of the username. But for now, let's just use their pub key because it is a unique identifier for every person who's making one of these posts. And we don't need the full pub key. Let's just use the first, let's say, 20 characters of it. And then we'll add a ... And so let's refresh and see how that looks. Okay. We have created this object, and let's console log it to see if it looks right. And I can stop console logging the content of all those things. Object is not defined. Okay, it's obj. Save, refresh. Ooh, awesome. So we have a vote count of 0 for all of these things. We have their title is based on their subject line or their first 100 characters. We're getting the user's username, which is the first 20 characters of their pub key. And right now, the only thing left is their subreddit, which we are currently we're just using this hard-coded one, but I have a function very similar to the previous one called extract subreddit from event. And that'll do the same thing as the previous one. But instead of extracting the subject, it's going to get the user's the subreddit that they're posting to. So I will just put that right under here, and then let me show you how it works. So it takes the event as a parameter. It creates a null subreddit variable. It goes through every tag they've created, finds the one labeled A, because according to the NIP 172, you use an A tag to propose a post. So new post request, you use an A tag to say which event you're posting it into. And then you use colon separations to specify several different things, but one of them is the identifier of the community. That's the subreddit. So what I do is I delimit the text by colons and split it into 3 chunks, or however many there are, and grab the third one, which is the identifier of the community, the subreddit. And then I return that And if there's nothing, then I say there is no subreddit. But otherwise, we return whatever's right there. So let's just go back to our function. And instead of using where did the soda go, we'll use extract subreddit from event and pass in our event. So we refresh the page, and now we have excellent objects that we can populate our screen with, all pulled from Nostr. I think that's the last thing we'll do for this session, is I will actually populate this screen using that content, and we'll move on from there. Okay, we'll pick up from here next time. Let me just do this. So we no longer need to pull in this hard-coded content. So we will do that. And instead, we will run this up here. And we will replace item with object. And this should show us a full screen full of Nostr events. Oh, we forgot the index. So we will just have it be 0 for each one for now. And look at that. We've got a full screen full of events pulled in from Nostr with information about what subreddit they're posting to, the title of the thing they're posting, and metadata about the user who posted it. So that's what we'll do for today's lesson. Next time we'll pick up with clicking these things, viewing comments, and interacting with the posts in a more comprehensive way. But thank you for tuning in to the Nostr development course. I hope you keep watching.